Welcome back to the Bees Like That podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris. I'm gonna react to this Methadone, the painkiller. It's a New York Times video from 2008. But I've stated pretty publicly, or pretty openly and clearly, what my position is about MAT and indeterminate treatment time frames and stuff like that. And anyway, this title at least caught my eye and it looks interesting, so we're gonna react to it, see how it goes.
Marion County Fire, what's the address of your emergency?
It's a Motel 6.
What room number?
It's room 238. And the gentleman said they must be having some kind of reaction to some kind of medicine.
And then I got the phone call. And she said, Miss Garvin, you were aware that your son was brought into our emergency room? And I told her yes. And she said, I'm sorry, but he didn't make it.
On a Sunday afternoon 2 summers ago, Nancy Garvin's son Robbie lay down for a nap in a motel room and never woke up. He had suffered with debilitating back pain for years.
I've heard that story a bunch of times, and that was a complete accident, pausing on this methadone frame. And this is how it used to go. People, well, still does go, people attempting to get off of opiates or prescribed more opiates. And this is the lesser known thing about methadone, is that it is actually an opiate.
That morning, he took some pills his doctor had prescribed him only 2 days earlier for his pain.
So the day at the doctor's office, he called me on his cell phone and he asked me, Mom, what's methadone? And immediately I asked him why. And he told me the doctor had given it to him for pain. These are all some of the stuff for his medical records.
A nurse with 20 years of experience, Nancy Garvin suspected methadone was to blame.
The toxicology came back that it was confirmed that methadone was the cause of his death.
Although commonly associated with treating heroin addiction, in the last decade, methadone prescriptions have exploded across the country.
Do you have pain going down your arm or down your leg? Methadone is an excellent analgesic, but it's a more complex analgesic. And therefore, why do you use methadone? Because it's been around a long time, it's generic, and it's dirt cheap. And so a lot of insurance companies have encouraged you to prescribe methadone.
I'm glad that was said in the video and not out of my mouth. What does that entire section of the video boil down to? Simply put, this is a business. There's a bottom line, and there are people who are tasked with monitoring and who are responsible for that bottom line. And in big business like pharma, the bottom line means we pay as little as possible to make as much as possible. So methadone, along with other painkillers and opiates, is big business. And like I said, this video is from 2008, and they were prescribing methadone for pain. Whether or not they still do that today, my experience, I've never been prescribed methadone, but my experience working in services, especially stabilization services, and being in recovery myself and in close proximity to other addicts who access methadone and MAT services. Primarily, I observed methadone being prescribed for medication-assisted therapy, MAT anyway. People use it to get off of dope, heroin, and fentanyl. And like I say, they're prescribed it for an indeterminate time, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but let's keep going.
This is what we're going to do. We got to get on that side of the Capitol.
The spread of methadone has come with a fatal cost. It is now the fastest growing cause of narcotic death. In 2005, the most recent year with available national data, methadone was implicated in more than 4,400 deaths. In June, families of methadone overdose victims.
Now that is wild to me, because today, in the culture and environment today surrounding methadone and MAT, you don't hear these conversations about this drug. You hear it's a miracle, it's a wonder drug, it's the gateway to recovery for people who otherwise just swan dove off of these higher ledges, attempting to get clean and failing time and time again. This is the same drug that back in 2008 and 2005 was considered an epidemic. Look at the sign this lady is holding. Methadone killed my son. Now, this shows you also the power of government, pharma, and media, big pharma especially. Now, again, as I say, methadone is a wonder drug. And in every city, I'd be surprised if there weren't an MAT clinic in every city. I'd be surprised if there wasn't one within a 30-mile radius.
Marched on Washington to lobby for stricter regulation of the drug.
We decided to form an organization so that we can bring awareness and let people know just what is going on with this drug, how deadly it is.
A majority of methadone deaths appear to result from the illegal use of methadone as a recreational drug. However, an unmeasured but significant share.
This is another thing that I point out very frequently on the podcast. How is it that such a miraculous, life-saving, miracle wonder drug ends up in the hands of people that it is not prescribed to, and they end up overdosing and dying? I'm not sure what the numbers are today about methadone overdoses. They've likely decreased since 2005 and 8, but still, the question is still important to ask.
Involves a well-meaning doctor prescribing methadone for pain.
This is a wonderful medicine used appropriately, but it's an unforgiving medicine used inappropriately. So many legitimate patients, following the direction of the doctor, have run into trouble with methadone, including death. And usually it was because the doctor was not educated in regards to how this medicine works in the body, and the initial dose was too high.
Methadone has a long half-life in the body and can build up to dangerous levels quickly. Pain experts, like Dr. Howard Height, agree that the safe way to prescribe methadone is to be extremely conservative, starting with low doses, 5 to 10 milligrams a day, and slowly building up the levels in the blood. But in
There is another tricky part. That today, the language around this area of the topic is therapeutic dose. That's the in vogue catchphrase and more sophisticated language surrounding this topic and issue is therapeutic dose. I've heard and know people who are on 125 milligrams of methadone, which is wild. Look at, when they say extremely conservative, talking about 5 to 10 milligrams to start and then titrating up. 125 milligrams, and that's just the person that I know. I would not be surprised if there were people out there who weren't on higher doses than that. And that's a dose where you start to see people too, as soon as they sit down, start to nod off and fall asleep. So if you know anyone at work who's doing that, there's a chance that they may be on methadone or Suboxone, or they're just really, really tired.
Bobby Garvin's case, his initial prescription was for up to 60 milligrams per day. A friend who was traveling with him when he died says that Garvin only took his prescribed doses.
I was unaware that she was taking methadone until after she passed away.
In other methadone overdose cases, like that of Diane Saida, the doctor prescribed conservative doses, but the patient seems not to have followed the prescription.
It was our only daughter's 9th birthday. The next morning, we went to bed sometime around midnight, and I woke up and she was not moving.
Saida, a mother of 6, was prescribed methadone after a snowboarding accident left her with severe neck pain.
She probably shouldn't have been given the medicine, just given her history.
Saida was already suffering from depression and bipolar disorder when she began taking methadone. Her husband says she should never have been prescribed a drug with such dangerous potential side effects in the first place.
No, you're not taking this.
And this is a tricky part as well. Today things I think are a bit different with the shared medical information between providers, especially with regard to prescriptions. You will see, but it's self-reported, any of these mental health diagnoses, I'm almost sure of most of the time. In the case of like civil commitments and stuff like that, and there may be some variances there, but at least in my experience, the things that I share as a responsible person in recovery, when I go to the doctor, if I've been hurt, like I had a tooth pulled a couple of years ago and they prescribed me pain medication. I told them I didn't want it and I was in recovery. They prescribed it anyway. I just threw the script away. I didn't take any of it, any of that. But a person in recovery who's responsible and mindful will tell their provider and ask for opiate or other pain medication alternatives. That's a smart thing to do, especially if you're new in recovery. But back then, it doesn't seem like that was the case with this person.
With 6 kids and driving from 18 practices and games a week, I don't believe she filled that prescription when she was originally given. You guys, just do a quick cleanup. I want this.
Lab tests, requested by her doctor just 4 days before her death, indicated that Saida had not taken her pills in at least 2 weeks. Safe methadone treatment requires a slow buildup of the drug in the blood. A police investigation then concluded that sometime in the 4 days before she died, she had most likely taken several more pills per day than her prescribed dose, not realizing the severity of such action.
I don't believe she understood what it was, or was not educated well enough to understand how dangerous it can be.
Saida's doctor would not speak about her case directly. However, a knowledgeable person in his office said that they prescribed methadone conservatively, and only after doing a thorough patient history and meticulously instructing the patient about taking the drug and its potential side effects.
Of course you're going to say that.
And the prescriber has an absolute responsibility to go over the risk and benefits of the medicine, including saying that if you take this medicine differently than what I prescribe, you're putting your life at risk. Sure. Would you like to come back?
Methadone, for me, has been a lifesaver. It's given me my life back.
Overall, 24/7 pain on the average.
I'd say
Alexandra Sherman suffered for years with debilitating muscular pain until she found Dr. Height.
my pain came on slowly and began to just take over my life. It became all the time my senior year in college, and it just destroyed my friendships, basically the beginnings of my career.
Dr. Height switched Sherman to...
So, mind you, I want people to pay particular attention to the language that's used here. When they say, I mean, I won't debate whether or not methadone has a long half-life or not, but when they say build up in the system, what they're really talking about is tolerance to the drug. That's just silly language in a way to kind of like circumvent some accountability. Anyway, that's just like saying I need to titrate up my alcohol. You're building a tolerance is what you're doing.
to methadone when her student health insurance was reduced to only $500 a month for drug prescriptions.
Well, that unfortunately was one.
And if it hadn't occurred to you after what I just said, building a tolerance and a habit and dependency. So this person, I don't know her history with addiction and other drugs, but certainly now, whatever milligram per day dose she's titrated up to manage her muscle pain issues, she's 100% physically, at least physically dependent on methadone.
1 month's basically supply of OxyContin. And so I switched to methadone because it was $35 a month.
Mm-hmm. $35 a month, same effect.
As with all methadone patients, Dr. Height had Sherman sign a contract of mutual obligation and carefully went over the drug's potential risks. Sherman always gets her methadone from the same pharmacist. Dr. Height counts her pills to make sure she is taking the correct dose, and she submits to regular drug urine tests to make sure she is not mixing drugs.
And I'm getting married in October. It's allowed me to live a normal life again, and for that, there's nothing else that I feel would work.
But Dr. Height's practices are not the norm, and doctors throughout the country continue to prescribe methadone, unaware of the drug's high potential for overdose.
But methadone has some real substantial advantages and some real substantial disadvantages.
To address the gap in doctor education about the dangers of methadone, the federal government has recently started sponsoring seminars for practicing doctors and nurse practitioners.
As a person starts taking methadone, they start revving up their hepatic metabolism, and they sort of...
The seminars, however, are voluntary. Some doctors and patient advocates are calling for mandatory training for doctors who prescribe methadone and stronger measures to keep it out of the hands of pill abusers. Meanwhile, the number of methadone pain prescriptions continue to rise.
People are dropping dead like flies from this drug. It's got to stop. It's got to stop.
Mind you, again, just a reminder, this was 2008. Listen to what she just said. People are dropping dead like flies from this drug. Now, granted, a lot has possibly and likely changed with regulation and prescription and stuff like that, but I know for sure that if not equal to, more people today are prescribed methadone than back in 2008. Like I said, there's MAT clinics nearly everywhere. Big business.
Stop, and it can stop. But somebody's got to do something about it.
So yeah, there it is, man. I mean, I sometimes feel like a kook. Well, I know that I'm not a kook, but I sometimes feel alone when I don't go after MAT, but I do my best to try to highlight for people who are the larger proponents of MAT that it's addiction. It's not recovery, it's addiction. We can call it harm reduction, we can call it all these different things, but let me ask you one more question. What happens if you stop taking that methadone right now? If you do not titrate down, what happens? You get dope sick. The same way that you would get sick if you stopped using fentanyl, the same way you would get sick if you stopped using heroin, the same way I would get sick if I stopped drinking alcohol. Were I drinking, but I'm not. Same difference. It's active addiction, but it's just managed, prescribed, and more socially acceptable now. But do you see the way that the spin doctors, media, and big pharma have now flipped the script, and now methadone is a wonder drug? That's a good idea. The next reaction video will be on how methadone is framed today. But if you didn't do it on the way in, think about doing it on the way out. Hit that like, subscribe, and post notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the cool shit we talk about here on the Bees Like That podcast. Peace, y'all.